Hello! It is finally Black Death Plague Day in world history. I have been waiting for this day since this pandemic has started, where I actually have a good reason to wear my plague mask. So, what we will be doing is we're going to look into this idea of how did the Black Death, the Black Plague, spread. This is going to spread in the 1300s. It's going to kill off large percentages of populations across Europe and Asia. And there's still quite a bit of debate on how this actually spread. We hear everything from that fleas on rats is one of the normal things we hear, but that doesn't explain everything. We hear that maybe it was what they thought at the time is miasma, or bad air, basically germs that spread it. That doesn't answer every question about it. And then a lot of people at the time thought it was God's wrath. Possibilities. So we are going to look into this today. So what you need to do first is to open up in two different tabs, both what is called the Black Death Journal and the Black Death exhibits. So what I would highly suggest doing is that you open them in their own tab so that you can go back and forth between the two. What I'm going to do on this is I'm going to basically walk through this with you for the most part, and I will say things like you could pause here, or if you realize that you want to finish typing the part before I keep talking, you can just pause me. That's kind of the nice part about this is we're all able to go at our own pace, and if I'm going too fast in the video, YouTube has a pause button, which is very, very convenient for us. So if I'm moving on to Exhibit C and you still want to be typing on B, just pause me. And that will be pretty helpful. So right now, pause me if you don't have both of these documents open and ready to go. If you have it, here we go. So we're going to be starting right here on Exhibit A. So if you move on over to this document, it first just starts with what this Black Death was like. So it says, you will first develop these red boils on the thighs or upper arms about the size of a bean. Eventually, this infects the whole body and penetrated it so that the patient violently vomited blood. This vomiting of blood continued without intermission for 3 days. You will also develop larger gland boils on the thighs, the arms, and the neck. At first, these were of the size of a hazelnut and developed accompanied by violent shivering fits. Soon the boils grew to the size of a walnut and then that of a hen's egg. The sickness lasted 3 days, and on the 4th, at the latest, he succumbed and died. This was happening to anywhere between 30 and 60% of Europe. People were just continually getting this pretty awful disease that was 3 to 4 days of torture, and then they would die. So that's what we're working with here. I tried to make it so that every exhibit has the letter on it to keep you organized. So, Exhibit A, what are the 3 provided options for what caused the Black Death? I've already said them. Can you think of anything else that might have caused it? Without seeing all the evidence, which theory do you think is correct? So you are able to type in these boxes to give your answers to these questions, and they can be found right here. So the big 3 reasons are the spread by rats, so that they were going around and the fleas were then biting people. This idea of miasma, that's going to be where the plague mask comes in, and that this bad air being spread caused it, or that it was a punishment by God. Options. Options. So you put those three down. Anything else you can think of that might have caused it? We're currently living through a pandemic, so maybe you can think of some things. And then without seeing evidence, which theory do you right now think is correct? Up to you, up to you. Moving on to B. So, if you go and you look at options B, there's two of them. One of them is a description of the medieval Black Death, and then this is a description of modern bubonic plague. Fun thing, plagues still exist. People still get the bubonic plague, even in America, even in 2020. It's not like we've eradicated plague from the earth whatsoever. So it is still a thing, and it being still a thing, you can find modern day symptoms of it. So what you're going to want to do is on slide 3 and 4 here for B, you're going to answer how are these diseases similar, how are these diseases different, and what would you say they are more similar or more different to each other. Go ahead, pause me and do that. Alrighty, moving on to C. C is one of my most favorite slides that we have here. One of the ways to study a very, very old pandemic is to study another one. We actually learn a lot, even about our current pandemic, by other pandemics. They're just not always that different. So, what we have here are 3 other plagues in history. So this first one is a bubonic plague that broke out in 1850. It was able to spread to several different places, including San Francisco. This one is the San Francisco plague of 1906. And then in India in 1994, you have a very, very similar to the bubonic plague, the Black Death as well. So you can read through all 3 of those to answer which of these 3 plagues described have in common with the Black Death, and what do these plagues prove is the cause of modern bubonic plague. Go ahead, pause me and answer. Alrighty, we'll move on to D. So D has pretty interesting thing here. So as you can see, this looks very similar to my mask here. This mask was, yes, only $10 on Amazon. Best waste of $10 I've ever spent. However, this was used. This is a historic thing that was used. So these plague doctors would dress like this. They'd wear this big old cloak, okay, and they would cover their hands in these pretty thick gloves. It was all coated in wax, trying to keep miasma off of them. They also, sadly Miss Reed said I couldn't have one, held about a 4-foot stick that was used to beat people with. So if somebody got too close to a plague doctor, they just bam, and they'd hit them with it. They'd have a top hat, which was kind of part of identifying who was this plague doctor. And then they'd have their plague mask along with goggles. And this really was about miasma and the bad smells. So they would shove in the nose of this a bunch of either roses or different herbs and flowers in order to not smell the bad smells, because they thought that it was this bad smell that was spreading this disease. So if I'm smelling roses, I'm doing better. Now, that did nothing as far as smelling roses, didn't prevent the spread. wearing a mask actually did, though. Who would have thought? The plague doctors statistically got the plague less than not plague doctors. And they were going into infected people's houses. And now it's kind of being said that it was likely between the goggles, the mask, and the gloves that they didn't get it as much, which is very, very similar to what we've been hearing about our current pandemic, I should say. So, this asks you, why did the plague doctors wear those strange masks? How did Ring Around the Rosie apply to the Black Death? It'll ruin your childhood right there. And what does it seem the medieval doctors believed spread the disease? So, go ahead, pause me, answer, and we'll move on to E. So, E here is a letter from a monk to his mother. As we kind of talked about Monday and Wednesday, most people during the Dark Ages are illiterate. However, monks aren't. And towards the end of the Dark Ages, which is where we are with the plague, more and more people can read. But definitely a monk can, and apparently in this instance, so can his mother. So he writes this letter to his mother. To go back to our questions here, why does the monk think God is angry? What happened to the Pope? And why doesn't he think bad air spread the disease? So why does he think it is God being angry? And why does he think God is angry? So that's E. Pretty straightforward. Pause me and then we'll move on to F. Alright, so F is interesting. What we have here with letter F is first a map of the spread of the Black Death and a map of medieval travel routes. Just bouncing back and forth, you might notice a few things, right? They look kind of similar. You have kind of trade by sea, or the spread by sea routes. And then you switch down here, and that's a major trade route. And then you look up here at some of these going up to like Nuremberg, into Rome, Constantinople, and then you move back down to trade, and they're all going to basically the same place. So these maps, while showing two different things, look very, very eerily similar. So, to get here to F, what direction did the Black Death spread around Europe? So, it's primarily spreading on these trade routes, and a lot of times it's moving north as well. Things are moving north. Alrighty. Based on the map, what do you think it spread? Why do you think it spread that direction? And travel at this time was very slow. How do you think the disease could have spread so fast? Interesting question. Not really a super right or wrong answer there, but something to think about. Alrighty, pause me when you're ready. We'll be at G. Okay, G here. Oh. G is a notice of extermination. So it says, on Monday, the 14th of July of the year 1349, be it proclaimed that all house pets will be exterminated. It has been decided that animals are carriers of the pestilence. These animals live in our homes, causing the problem to be even worse. This action is needed to keep us safe. So yes, they attempted to kill all the cats and dogs living in people's houses. PETA would be ashamed. So, what we have here then is, what does this poster say about the spread of disease? How do they think the disease is spreading? And then if rats were a problem in a town, is it a good idea to kill all the cats? What do cats like to eat? This likely made it worse. This likely made it worse. So he can go ahead and answer that one. Pause me, and when you're ready, we will move on to H. Okay, for H, I can't quite get this video to play, but on this one video, so I will post that video separately for you to watch for H. But what H is really getting at is many historians aren't convinced about the whole rat thing in Europe, that rats were spreading it. And a big reason for that is black rats are never really found in rural areas. And the disease still spread in rural areas. So if it was spreading just on rats, why would it still spread to these rural areas? There's not really an answer for that with these simple rats did it type of thing. So if there were a few rats in England, what does that tell you about the Black Death really was? They're kind of arguing that in other plagues spread by rats, there's all sorts of reports about piles of dead rats. And there's dead rats everywhere. That's what happened in India. No record of that happening in the 1300s in Europe whatsoever. Alrighty. We will not do this part. You do not need to fill out this part of the sheet. I'm way more concerned that you went through the evidence. Now that you've gone through the evidence, here's really what historians think kind of happened with the Black Plague, with the Black Death. Basically, it was spreading in two different ways. It was spreading first as a pneumonia, okay? And a pneumonia and a virus are able to spread basically by the little spit particles that come out of your mouth and people breathe it, and then they get this. So that really makes sense for the trade routes part. They also think that it was spreading on fleas that were on rats, but that it was both. That both of these things were happening at the same time. It's not really a historian thing to go with the God did it idea. So of our three options that we kind of started with, historians mainly look at to both that this was spreading like a pneumonia virus type of thing. So it was spreading because people didn't wear their masks, and that it was also spreading by flea ticks, but that is actually probably spreading more as a pneumonia, which would make more sense on why it goes into these rural areas, why it is so tied to these trade routes, that this was able to happen. So, again, you don't need to fill out this part. Once you have all the questions answered, I'm pretty sure I'll get this automatically. I'll let you know if I don't. One last really important thing I forgot to mention before. This video is for Thursday. Friday, we will not have a Zoom meeting. I'm taking a personal day. I will not be in the building, all that fun stuff. So Friday, Monday, and Tuesday are e-learning days. I'll have everything posted. It'll be as clear as I can make it, but we are not Zooming in those days. So if you have any questions, email me, and have a wonderful weekend.